If I told you to hit a bunch of crazy shots while you practice that you would never hit on the course, you might call me nuts. But let me explain to you why getting way outside the box in your range sessions can help improve your stock shots and help solve one of the biggest problems in golf. Experimental practice is one of the most fruitful and fun methods that I think golfers of all levels should explore. Hi, my name's Jon Sherman. I'm the author of The 4 Foundations of Golf, co-host of the Sweet Spot podcast, and PGA Tour coach. But most importantly, I'm a golfer just like you. And in this video, I'm going to give you a tool that'll help bring your ball striking to the next level. So before we get into the benefits of experimental practice, I want to talk about one of the biggest problems that I see, and this is something I called zombie range sessions. Most players default to a repetitive or blocked format of practice where they're just raking balls and hitting. They're not really giving much attention to their target, what they're trying to accomplish, and more importantly, they're not absorbing feedback on each shot. And then people always ask, why am I hitting it so good on the range? And then that never translates to the course. And I believe this is one of the main reasons why. Another problem I see, because you're watching this on YouTube, is that the algorithm is constantly feeding you more swing tips and more information about the golf swing. So every week you're showing up to the range with a new drill or a new technique that you're working on, and there's really no continuity, and you're kind of just changing lanes in a traffic jam and getting nowhere. So what you need to do is you need to break up the monotony. You need to stop doing the same thing over and over again if you want to get different results. And more importantly, you need to answer the biggest question that golf asks of you when you play, and that's how are you going to adjust when your golf swing inevitably changes each time you play. Each time we show up on the course, we have different tendencies. Sometimes your club face is a little bit more open all day and you're losing your drives to the right, or maybe it's a bit closed and you've got a pull hook going, or you could be chunking your irons around the green. If you listen to our podcast, The Sweet Spot, you know that we always like to go back to the big 3 fundamentals of ball striking. Where are you striking it on the club face? Where is your club face pointing at impact, also known as face angle? And ground contact. And when you think about these big 3 and what shows up on the golf course each time, you'll notice that every golfer has to deal with this variability and what shows up on any given day. And the better golfers are more equipped to deal with these changes, and they have interventions so they can make that slice a little less extreme, or if they're losing the ball to the right, they have a way to close the club face a little bit. So if you're not practicing properly, and again, you're just doing the same thing over and over again, you're not prepared to answer these questions on the golf course, and this is how you get to the next level. I can tell you that when I was a 10 handicap, I couldn't adjust when I had a flaw show up on the course, and now that I'm a plus handicap, if I'm losing my driver to the right or I'm hitting it too low, I have these internal feels that I've developed through experimental practice. So what I want you to do with this form of practice is essentially build what I would call different reference points in your golf swing. These are all these little internal feels that you hear Tiger Woods always talk about. So for example, if you're a big slicer of the golf ball, you're dealing with a very out to in swing path and an open club face. So by exploring a much different swing path, perhaps an in to out and a closed club face, as I said, you can build different reference points in the golf swing. And when you go in the opposite direction, a light bulb can go off and unlock some really big doors for you in your golf game. So what do I mean by experimenting when you practice? Let me run through a list of examples, and as I say them, hopefully you'll get some ideas on what you can do. So the first one is shaping the ball in both directions. So if you're a slicer of the golf ball, left to right is probably easier for you, but can you explore what it feels like to hit a big draw? You can close your stance a little bit, take the club more on the inside, do anything you can to make that ball curve right to left for a right-handed golfer, obviously. That would be one of the most prime examples of experimental practice is, can you start shaping the ball in both directions? And it doesn't have to be perfect. Another great form of this is starting the ball down different target lines, and this will be working on what I believe is the most important ball striking skill, which is club face control. So if you had your target line, can you start the ball straight? But more importantly, can you intentionally start the ball to the left of your target and to the right? And for beginner golfers, this might be really hard, and if you start the ball way right and way left, that's fine. I just want you to explore what different club face orientations feel at impact. And when you play around with this, again, a light bulb might come off that you never felt before. Another great example that you always hear me talk about is experimenting with where you're striking the ball in the club face. So get your Dr. Scholl's Odor X spray out, start spraying your club face. Can you intentionally strike the toe or the heel and obviously the center of the club face? For example, I'm a bit of a heel striker, so I need to focus on exploring what striking the toe feels like. And in doing that, I can move that impact location a little bit closer to the center of the club face. Or you can experiment with ground contact and the low point of your golf swing. There's a great video out there I saw a few years ago of Rory, and he tops his driver on purpose. And that's a perfect example of him controlling his arc depth of his swing. He can raise it up on command. So this could be with your wedges or irons if you have access to a grass driving range, or even using a tool like the divot board, which I love, and try to experiment where is that club bottoming out. So if you're someone who struggles with thin contact, you might try and initiate contact with the ground way behind the ball. Again, you can get very extreme with this and just see what it feels like. Maybe you'll have to shift your weight forward or back a bit, but experiment with where that club is bottoming out on the turf. Another great example I love to do when I'm practicing is selecting a random yardage. It could be 100 or 125 yards, and then trying to hit multiple clubs to that distance. See if I can hit my 5-iron, 7-iron, 9-iron, clubs that I normally wouldn't use. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm controlling my swing speed and a few other things at impact to try and accomplish that task. If you like to practice with wedges, you can pick one yardage and try and hit different trajectories. Can you hit a low running shot, a medium and high trajectory? And what that allows you to do is kind of adjust how you're presenting the loft of the club at impact. Are you having your hands way ahead of the ball and de-lofting it, or keeping your hands level or even behind the ball at impact to add loft? And if you have opportunities to experiment with different lies, whether it's in the rough, side hill, uphill, in the bunkers, you can absolutely do that. So this is just a list to get you started, but I wanted to give you some ideas on how you can get outside of the box when you practice. And one of the most important things when you practice is feedback. So let's say you were trying to shape the ball in different directions. Start paying attention to what internal feel you had that accomplished the task. Was it something in your stance or the way you took the club away to hit that draw? Or if you're experimenting with trying to strike different parts of the club face, was it simply thinking about it that accomplished the task? Or sometimes if you're trying to strike the toe, you might set up with the ball closer to the toe. Another good example would be with face angle. If you're trying to start the ball in different directions, maybe you flash the club face open at impact before you hit, or even you rotated it open and then grip the club. So again, pay attention to what helps you accomplish the task, and we're trying to build these different reference points in our golf swing. I can't tell you how many times I've done this through the years and a light bulb goes off and I'm like, oh, that's how I close the club face at impact. Maybe it was something different in my grip and I got a bit stronger, or at the top of my swing I was trying to feel the club face orientation. So we're always looking for these little clues and pieces of feedback when we practice. Here's one really important distinction I want to make. I'm asking you to try a bunch of crazy shots when you practice, but I'm not asking you to do that on the golf course. If you've followed me for a while and read my book, The 4 Foundations of Golf, you know that I prefer a very simple approach to the game. If you fade the ball with your driver and irons, stick with that fade. You don't need to work it in both directions. You don't need to change the trajectory of your irons to low and really high on command, or even with your wedges. My goal for every golfer in the 10 seconds before each shot is that you're reacting to your target and being an athlete versus standing over the ball frozen with all these different shot choices. So again, I want to make that very clear. I don't want you to hit all these different shots on the courses, but the reason I'm asking you to do this form of practice is so that you build more internal knowledge of your golf swing. So when you get outside the box and explore these different extremes, it will make your stock shot better. So for example, I draw the golf ball. If I know how to slice it or hook it on command, on the days that my draw is a little bit more extreme and a bit of a hook, I have a fix for that. Whether I'm flashing the club face open a little bit more, or I'm trying to make my swing path a little less in to out. So this might sound a bit confusing to you, but essentially what I'm asking you to do is explore the extremes and get outside of the box so that you get better at that very narrow range of shots on the course. You have to answer that big question of when you show up on the first tee and you block your drive to the right, and then the next 3 or 4 tee shots are like that. You have to know, as a ball striker, my club face is way too open. What can I do to shut it down? When Scottie Scheffler won his first Masters, I noticed the first 4 holes he was hitting a bit of a pull hook and not his stock fade shot. And he knew in his head that his club face was too closed at impact, and I guarantee you he had an internal feel, on how to make that adjustment. And of course he did, and he went on to win the tournament. So don't think this is a problem for high-level golfers. If anything, it's a bigger problem for the beginner to intermediate players. And if you get stuck doing the same thing over and over when you practice, and you don't try to explore different parts of your swing, then you're going to be stuck inside that box forever. So one question that always comes up is, how much time should you devote to this type of experimental out-of-the-box practice? It doesn't need to be all the time. Everyone has different formats of practice they like. I mentioned earlier in the video that I don't want people just raking balls and doing those zombie range sessions, but repetitive practice can be really beneficial if you're doing it the right way. But it's a good idea to mix things up to break up the monotony, add some fun, and more importantly, build skills. So I would say a good rule of thumb for most players is that you wouldn't need to devote more than 10 to 20% of your practice sessions where you're kind of messing around with these different shots. So I think if you're earlier in your golf journey and you're not as skilled as a ball striker, you can use a bit more of this style of practice versus the more established, skilled player. You know, they might benefit from more repetitive practice or performance games. So it's something that you should definitely try out. Don't fear it. But of course, like anything in golf, there's no right answer for everyone. So you can try it out and see how it works for you. But don't be afraid to experiment and play like a child when you practice. I promise you, if you do some of this, there's going to be some type of light bulb that goes off. And more importantly, when you're on the golf course and struggling, you'll have more solutions to get back to what I would call a more neutral territory. If you enjoyed these thoughts on practice, it's one of the many ideas from my best-selling book, The 4 Foundations of Golf. You can check it out on Amazon. The link is below in the description. And don't miss my other video where I share 9 brutal truths about golf that I wish I knew from the beginning.